Hello, everyone, and welcome to our BingeBooks November Book Club. I am so excited to be joined today by Kathryn Le Veque, a medieval historical romance author. We're going to be talking all about her book, Lion of War, but also just writing historical romance and what an interesting and fascinating world that can be. So welcome, Kathryn. It's so great to have you here. And do you want to just start off by telling the audience just a little bit about you and your books?
Sure. Hi. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really, really happy to be here and talk about historical romance, which is my absolute favorite genre. I have been writing since I was 13. That's when I wrote my first book. And it just never stopped. You know, some people like to paint, some people like to crochet. I always wrote. And I started publishing in about 2011 and it had just never looked back. So, I mean, I have 154 books now. And we're talking big books, like Lion of War is about 100,000 words. So these are 100,000+ words. They're just big books, but I love epics and that's what I write. So that's my story.
That is fascinating. I had no idea you were so prolific. 100 books is insane. And like you said, you write big books. So from the beginning, was historical romance always where you were at?
Well, no, actually, I think historical fiction was something that really fascinated me from the beginning. An author by the name of Pauline Gedge, who's a Canadian author. She is a prolific writer of historical fiction, and I read her when I was about 13. And it was a book called Child of the Morning about the life of Hatshepsut, who was Egypt's first pharaoh, female pharaoh, and it was like a whole world opened up to me, and ever since then, I have been in love with anything historical. And I loved Egypt. You know, that's just something I've always wanted to go to Egypt. But my taste changed. And I think, you know, as you get older, sometimes your tastes change. And as readers, your tastes change and you read other things. But for me, what got me started with historical romance was in the 90s when medieval historical romance just kind of exploded. And we had all these great authors like Bertrice Small and Virginia Henley. You know, all of these queens of historical romance. And I read Virginia Henley and it was like, boy, the light bulb went on. That was it. That was the moment I was like, that's what I'm meant to write. And ever since then, that is basically all I've written. I do have I think I have 15 contemporary romances, but those were written in between the medievals to kind of cleanse my palate a little bit. Yes, it was. They were palate cleansers. So, but yeah, I mean, it's something that I'm entrenched in. And, you know, you have people ask you, well, why don't you write something else? Why don't you write to market? You know, that kind of thing. And it's like, but this is what I love. Why would I write anything different? Because this is what I love.
I love that. And so it's so interesting. And you said you wanted to write forever. Did you think about going a safer path, like becoming a history teacher or something like that? Or what, from the beginning, it was like, I'm going to be a writer. That's what I'm going to do.
No. You know, what's funny is I was a musician all during school. And I always thought I would be a professional musician or a music teacher. Yeah, absolutely. I play 4 different instruments, or at least I used to. You know, now I probably hyperventilate myself if I tried. But, you know, it was just music was like the path. And I really thought that was it. But my parents were Depression babies. So they're very pragmatic people.
Yeah.
Very pragmatic people. So when I said something to the effect of, you know, wanting to be a writer or a journalist, you know, that was met with disapproval. They were like, no, you have to get a job that you can pay the bills with.
Right.
And so my degree's in business. That's my background because, you know, it paid the bills.
It probably has come in handy though. I mean, as a writer, you're an entrepreneur, you are your own business. Your books are I
am my own business, but I also am the CEO of Dragonblade Publishing, which is the #1 small press for historical romance on Amazon. And we publish hundreds of authors and thousands of books. And so that has really come in handy because we have found a niche. So to be able to produce a quality product at a low price for today's reader is just, it's so important to be able to get that out there, you know, get historical romance out there into the hands of people who love it and people who don't know they love it yet, but they will.
But they will. That's fascinating. So how do you, I mean, the fact that you're able to keep up that level of production and run a publishing house is incredible. So do you kind of split your days, or do you have specific days that are set aside for writing and other days that you handle the business side of things?
Well, as the CEO, I have hired staff, so I have an
Sure.
infrastructure. So they run the business really for me, and I'm just there for, the big decisions. I'm the face of the company. It's that, that kind of thing, the visionary.
Sure.
Um, but it still takes a good chunk of your day, just to get through things. And as you know, you
Yeah.
know exactly what I'm talking about. It just takes a good chunk of your day because you got to make sure things are good, and then you
Yeah.
can kind of focus on writing. But I try to write every day, but I work, 14, 16 hours every day,
Yeah.
7 days a week. And I'm sure you can relate to that because once you have these businesses going, it's not something you can start and just kind of kick back and ride on
Yeah.
your laurels.
Yeah. You
You really
can't set them
can't.
down.
No, 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 no. So, I try to get in at least 3 to 5,000 words a day when I'm writing. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It's just the luck of the draw for that day, really.
For a reader who's not familiar with medieval romance, and that's me, I'm a reader who's not familiar with medieval romance. Can you tell us a little bit about what really drew you to that specific genre, like that time period, and then what these stories are kind of really focused on and about? Like, what is a lot of times the driving conflict?
So let me introduce you to medieval
You're like,
historical
just wait.
romance.
Yes.
That's the question. So let me introduce you to what I love and what's my passion. Medieval historical romance, and it's like I mentioned when we were talking, as children, you're read fairy tales. I mean, we are, anything, like I said, Disney, Snow White, that kind of thing. Those are fairy tales. They are romance and they have a happily ever after. That's historical romance right there. So we all have that kind of ingrained into us a little bit. Now, what has fascinated me about medieval historical romance, and I actually get this question a lot. It's like, what makes it so appealing to you? For me, it is a period in history when mankind was kind of coming out of the dark ages and we're kind of trying to figure out what kind of a society we want to have and how we want to be and how our morals are going to be set and laws and all that kind of thing. So it's really a discovery of mankind's growth. I mean, that whole area is just mankind's growth. I specifically specialized in late 11th century through about the early 15th century. So it's about a 300-year span right there. But the ideals of chivalry are, they are formed there. And so the driving force in all of my books are there's always alpha males. They always are madly in love with their women. The women, I think the women vary more than the men do because it's funny when you read my books, all the characters are kind of have the same basic morals, but they have different characteristics or whatever. But the driving force is always this deeply passionate love. And I'm not talking lust. I'm talking these people love each other. They would die for each other. And there's always a happily ever after. I always have antagonists. I always have, conflict going on. Like in Lion of War, we have a Spanish knight who really does not like the direction in which his liege, who is Curtis, our hero, is going with the heroine, who's basically a prisoner. She was a knight. Well, she wasn't a knight, but she was a warrior, and she's fighting against these guys, and they basically capture her. And Curtis, he's kind of fallen for this chick because she's cute and she's feisty, and because it's a romance.
Yeah.
And the Spanish knight just doesn't like this, so he's kind of creating this underlying trouble and turmoil and antagonistic behavior going on. He's abusive, he's nasty, and he's a liar. So you always have to have a conflict, because I think when you have these conflicts, as a romance writer, this, when you have these conflicts, it makes that happily ever after that much sweeter, and it makes the relationship that much more interesting. But when dealing with historical romance, you're dealing with not, how can I say this? So I'm talking about medieval. There aren't a lot of rules. a lot of rules that, like, for instance, Regency would have. A Regency romance,
Yeah.
society-wise, there's a lot of rules. Yeah, so we're dealing with a little more leeway. And I have this saying when I write. I don't consider myself an expert in the medieval period, but I am a scholar of it. I'm a student of it. I understand it, as well as I can. But, I will put things in that some people go, did that really happen? Or did they really have that? If you can prove to me that they didn't have it, I won't ever use it again. So I kind of make my own rules in a sense.
Right.
But, I think the one thing that I love about medieval romance is how truly, truly passionate it can be in the raw sense of the word. Because, this is a society that basically it's a brutal society. It's a society where women are chattel, and that's a real challenge now because, people like empowered women, and they like, women who run their own, castles or companies or whatever. In medieval times, yeah, that did happen, but not a lot. So you have to write women who are realistically strong, but not over the top. So it's really interesting, but it's such a beautiful time period with such beautiful pageantry and majesticness, and it just is really very, very enjoyable if you've never read it before. So I really hope you, Alessandra, would read this, and I will personally gift you with a copy.
Lion of War. Well, so I do want to talk about Lion of War first. A few quick questions from readers. Jessica said, given that time period, does that mean life or death is more of a risk to characters versus, like, is that a very common thing where there's a situation where one of their lives is in danger?
Oh, absolutely. Because you're talking about battles, warfare all the time. I mean, that's how people held on to what they had. They had to fight people off. So, he's going to war. There's a chance he's going to die. She's at home waiting for him because, women really didn't go to war back then. And then with the women on the flip side, childbirth, that was a huge risk back then. I mean, today it's of course much better with modern medicine, but there was life and death was quick and it was expected. So maybe that makes the romance that much more precious because yeah, absolutely.
That your time is, and on that, not to get too personal, but like talking about childbirth and that sort of thing. I'm not a student of this time. So, was there like protection in terms of was pregnancy? Do you have much more unplanned pregnancies, or given that time period, is there a longer wait before physical intimacy? Like, what were the rules back then? Was it like a wait till marriage thing, or was it like,
well, yes,
free in a lot of different ways? Yeah.
Yeah, basically, it's funny, and this has come up in more than one book of mine, because the men weren't expected to remain pure. It was expected that a man's going to be a man.
Right.
Yeah, he can do whatever he wants. But the women had to stay pure. I mean, that was a big deal. You didn't want to marry a soiled woman. You just didn't want to. And I've had more than one heroine ask the hero, now, why do I have to remain pure and you don't have to, which is a legitimate question.
Yeah.
So, were the societal rules different? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was much more of a, I don't want to say religious, but, very structured, very pure. The women stayed pure. The men, were honorable. And certainly there was a lot of that going on. But, as far as childbirth and sex and that kind of thing, that they didn't wait. I mean, come on, if you're going to do it, you're going to do it. And this is a romance.
So. Any moment. Right. Yeah.
Exactly. And stuff like birth control and that kind of thing. It was really a crapshoot because, you'd go to the local apothecary and you'd get pessaries or whatever you wanted to get to prevent pregnancy. But even that was risky. Geez, what in the world are you putting in your body? And it was always on the woman. It was never on the man. So the women are the ones that are douching with vinegar and all sorts of, whatever they're doing,
Susie from Facebook said, hi from Fallbrook, California. I was
Hello.
How do you decide when to kill off a secondary character? And is it hard for you when you do? She loved Lion of War. You made me ugly cry once again.
That's the goal. That's the goal.
See, ugly cry is
The ugly cry is always the goal. You know, it's funny about the secondary characters because when I write, and Alessandra, I don't know if you know how you write, what your process is, but my process is I always know where I'm going to start. I know where I'm going to end, and I kind of know what goes on the beginning, but that's where I kind of pants through it a little bit. Sometimes I know I'm going to kill those secondary characters, and I really, I focus on that. I'm ready for it. I'm prepared for it. And then sometimes I don't, and it surprises me. And this person just, I'm writing and I'm going, yeah, this is a great place to kill this person, and they die, So, and believe me, a lot of times when I'm writing, I ugly cry right along, as I'm writing it. And it's funny that we bring this up because I have a book that I wrote a couple of years ago, and it was a much beloved character who died. And but he had been old in other books and he was sick. And so we knew it was coming. But I just sobbed through that whole scene. And my husband, he heard me and he comes in and goes, what is wrong with you? And I'm like, I killed, and so you know what he says to me? He stands in the doorway and he looks at me, he goes, you murderer. And he just walks away. I was like, oh, so yeah. So I guess basically, is it harder for me to kill off a secondary character? Always, because you get attached. You get attached. But if it's key to the story and it's moving that story along and it's meant to happen, then it does.
And are you a little gleeful about it?
Yes, always. No, not always, but sometimes it just has to happen. It has to do it.
It is a bit of a roller coaster. Another question, this one from YouTube, Jen said, for new readers, which book or series would you recommend starting with?
I would recommend starting with, well, of course, it depends on what you really like to read. Do you like to read a darker romance or do you like to read a lighter romance? If you like to read a darker romance, I have a series called The Executioner Knights, and it's a whole lot of fun. We have assassin nuns. We got all sorts of crazy things going on. So By the Unholy Hand is the first book in the Executioner Knights series, and I would recommend that if you like something a little darker. If you like something more family-oriented, start with The Sons of DeWolf. The first book is called Wolfheart, and that's a little lighter, a little more family-oriented, and that's a real good adventure for a newbie. But that's part of a series that's like 24 books long, so if you get hooked, you got a lot of material to go through, which is good.
You had me with assassin nuns. That was all I had to hear, and yeah, and I was sold. Thank you for that question, Jen, and for all of the readers watching, feel free to pop in any questions as we go. We have some hellos. Hi from Books and More with Jewish Ladies. It's great to have you all here. Talking about not assassin nuns, but sorry, I was moving back to our other questions. Talking about historical events, this was a question that came in earlier that I missed. From Jennifer, she said, with historical, do you use real events? I know you mentioned that,
yes.
You aren't sure, but if you know the history of wars and things like that. So if you write a book and it does have, and you feature a real war, and then there's 24 books in that series, you continue chronologically through the rest of.
Well, first of all, I always use historical events. Always. I mean, I don't ever make up historical events. So everything I use is real. And not only that, I use the people that were actually in those events. King John is in many of my books. William Marshall's in many of my books. So I'm always using historical characters because it makes them, it kind of brings them alive for readers. It makes them real. It humanizes them. And it just really lends an air of credence to the story itself. So I do use historical events, but my books are all written as standalone. So you don't have to read one to know what's going to happen in the next one. So it's all complete. So I don't carry battles over into other books. It's just, the battle's there in this book and it's done and everything is over. So yeah, I absolutely use historical events. And I'll tell you something, some historical battles and events are weirder, it's like truth is fiction is weirder than truth, truth is weirder than fiction, and some of them are really kind of amazing. So it's a lot of fun to be able to use those events to build a story.
Absolutely. I love this question from Kendall. And before I ask it, can you hold close to the camera the Lion of War cover so we can see it? Because I'm wondering, yeah. So Kendall's question is, with over 150 books, how do you keep finding shirtless guys? Do you ever do photo shoots? Is there like a website we should all go to? Like,
well, here's the thing.
They're not just shirtless. They have like props and stuff.
Oh, these guys are amazing. So let's take a look at this guy. Okay, so his body is real. So that's a real body. Yeah. It's the face and the hair that we change. So what we end up doing is calling Frankensteining them. We Frankenstein. We use body parts. And it's like somebody's arm, somebody's hair, somebody's nose. We Frankenstein these guys together. And my cover designer is Kim Killian. She's absolutely amazing. And she is brilliant at doing this kind of stuff. And, we can talk a little bit about AI in this, because AI and book covers is, kind of on the rise. Yeah. Kim uses she has her own photography business. So she uses her own images to train her AI to make faces if she's got to make a face. Yeah. So it's just, we use a lot of techniques, but mostly we just use the Frankensteining and painting. We do a lot of painting. So that's how we do it. And, I may have the same guy's body on 5 different covers, but it's different poses and it's a different face. Yeah. And you'd never know. So that's how we do it.
I love that. Because it's really hard to find a good looking face and a good looking body. It's like
so hard.
They're slim for, somebody's got to sift through the hundreds. It's a hard job, but we,
somebody's got to do it, right?
Yeah. Okay. I love that question, Kendall. Thank you for that.
Yes, that's a good one.
Okay. So let's talk about Lion of War a little bit. So you told us about the hero and the heroine. And this is book 2. So Can you tell us a little bit about this world of this series? How many books you have planned, if that, and how book 2 relates to book 1 in terms of the series?
So the series is a spin-off of one of my original major series, which was called The Delord Dynasty. And the first book in that series is called Rise of the Defender. And it is 297,000 words. It's absolutely enormous. Wow. Well, this is back in the day. I wrote it back in the day when, I really wasn't on a writing schedule. I had all the time in the world. So, so these big epics were they were what I loved to read. So that's what I was writing. So the guys in Sons of Delord, you'll see it down here at the bottom. Those are his sons. So the first book is actually Lion of Twilight, and we have another man chest there. And so Lion of Twilight's the first one, and that's one of his sons. And then Lion of War is the second son. There are 5 sons. So there are going to be 5 books in this particular sub-series. And I have one on pre-order already called Lion of Hearts, and then there's 2 more to come. So it's a really wonderful family-oriented type of series, because we're talking about, the father and the mother and all their kids and just how they are navigating a world that is just really, at that point in time, where it's in the early 13th century. So we have King John, and then we have his sons, and it's just a very brittle point in English history. So it's just really kind of lovely to watch how they navigate everything and still keep that family spirit alive through the whole thing, through all the wars and everything. So
I have to ask, I don't know if this is easier or harder, but I'm thinking about like the challenges you would face writing in this time period, and writing a love story in this time period, and dating back then and that sort of thing. And, there aren't phones, obviously, they're not texting each other.
No phones,
or, they're not seeing things on the internet that might cause them to figure out a secret or something. So, and I don't know if that would make it easier or harder from your standpoint, because the characters need to keep kind of running into each other. Are they in small, or most medieval romances, is this like a small town? Are they in a giant city?
It really depends on the book, but let's just use Lion of War as an example.
Yeah.
Okay, so the book starts out, if the readers have read it, they know how it starts out. It starts out at a castle on the Welsh border. that is contested. The king wants it because it's very strategic. So he sends the Delore boys in there to get it for him. Well, it's being defended by our heroine, Elle.
I love that.
She's picked up the mantle. She can fight. She has a sword. She's ready to go, and she hates the English with a passion, as most Welsh did back then. So how the meet cute in this is really classic, if they've read it. So what happens is you've got these big tall walls, and Curtis is climbing the walls. They would build these ladders to climb the walls, which was so dangerous. But how else are you going to get in?
Right.
So Curtis is up at the top. It's actually, they're on a platform. So they built a platform. He's up at the top. He's getting ready to go over the wall. Elle sees him coming, doesn't know who it is. She just knows an English knight's coming over the wall. So she runs at him head down, and she hits him right in the chest and knocks him off the ladder. So they both go kind of tumbling down and falling, and they end up on the ground. They roll into the moat. He picks her up, but she's upside down because he's going to throw her upside. He's going to throw her on the side of the moat. And there's just all this fighting going on, but she ends up almost drowning. So he's like, crap, I got to save her now. So he saves her, gets her back to where the prisoners are, and they figure out it's a girl. And he's like, you mean I was just thrown off the wall by a girl? Said it's really embarrassing. So that's their meet cute. But to address your question, no, there's no text. There's missives. They can write each other, of course. They could send messengers back and forth. But you got to realize that when you're dealing with England, it's a long country. So if you're sending a missive from the south to the north, it's going to take 3 or 4 weeks to get there. Nothing was instantaneous. So I always make sure that they're in the same location. There's no long distance crap going on. Yes. Everybody's in the same location. It's just much easier that way.
I love that. Yeah, that's so interesting. And then is there often typically, like, again, this isn't a time period I'm familiar with, but is there like a bar or a gathering place or things like that?
Feast. You have feasts.
Oh, there's feast.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
A feast is a medieval version of a ballroom in Regency England, or a bar or a club or something. That is it. You had a big feast, and feasts were, they could be a celebration, or it could just be, they felt like giving it. But, you have to remember that they're very expensive, because the Lord's, he's footing the bill for all of the food and the drink and everything.
It's like a wedding.
It's like a wedding. And so we do have a lot of feasts, because that's really kind of the only social gathering they really had, unless you want to go to church. And I have a real love-hate relationship with the Catholic Church in medieval England, because it was very oppressive and not very nice. And the church controlled everything down to your sex life if you let them. So, my characters don't really go to church. And in the series I was talking about, when a reader asks for a recommendation, which is the Executioner Knights, there's one book in which the heroine, she's forced to go to church all the time, as you do. And her rebellion is to write naughty prayer cards, because they would have prayer cards with prayers on them. So she sits there and she writes these naughty prayer cards, and she basically gives them out, and the priests are like, where are these naughty things? They're like naughty poems. Where are these coming from? So that's her rebellion against the church. So
that's so creative. I absolutely love that. So we have time for one more question, and then we are going to announce the winners. We have 3 winners that are getting signed copies of the first book in this series, which is Line of Twilight. So before we do that, we'll ask this final question. This one is from Trisha, and she says, have you traveled to exotic places for research?
I have gone to England, yes. I don't know if that's exotic, but yes, I have gone to England.
Means, yeah,
absolutely. I've gone to England. I've never been to Scotland. I hope to go someday. But my husband and I went to England about 10 years ago. He's an Ironman, so he was doing Ironman UK. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, and what was even cooler was that they were holding the swim portion in an old moat. So there was already a castle there. Yeah, so but you know what I had to tell my husband? I said, do you know what they put in the moats? Back in the old days, I mean, bodies, trash, human waste. I mean,
Sewage. Yeah.
yeah, sewage. And he's like, oh, really? Oh, dude, I don't want to swim in this. I'm like, sorry.
Oh my gosh. I wouldn't
So
even.
yes, yeah. So
Yeah.
I do hope to go back someday, but it was a great trip. And yes, I have done research.
What
So
a fantastic. Yeah, I can only imagine. So thank you so much. It was so fantastic to have you here. Huge congrats to our winners. Congratulations, Carol W., Mariana C., and Barbara S. You have all won signed copies. Our team will email you and be in touch with the delivery details. But thank you so much. If they're interested in your books, we already know where they should start. But where can they find out more about you and your books? Is there a website or somewhere else they should go?
I have a website, www.kathrynlevec.com. That will pretty much tell you every single thing, but I'm also on Amazon. I'm on Facebook. I have several groups on Facebook. So come and find me and let's talk historical romance and let me bring you over to the dark side.
Yes. I'm gonna find the assassin nuns and I'll be
yay.
I'll be right there. Thank you so much. Someone asked, what is the name of the book? I think they're asking about Lion of War. So Lion of War is today's. And what was the very first, if they were going to start, what was the name of the book that you recommended?
Lion of Twilight. Lion of Twilight is first in this series,
right?
In the Lion of War series. But the one that I'm talking about is called By the Unholy Hand. If you just go to Amazon and run Executioner Night series, it'll pop up. Everything will pop up.
Fantastic. And of course, you can find samples and more first chapters of Kathryn's books on BingeBooks.com.
Yes.
Our team posts the links below. So thank you so much. Thank you to everyone
who
joined.
I had a great time. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you again. And we will see you all on BingeBooks and hope you have a fantastic holiday season. Thank you all.